Jedediah lived deep in the Wild West woods, a place of tall trees and quiet shadows. Every morning the sun peeked through the leaves, but it rarely touched Jedediah's heart. He was a lumberjack, strong with an axe, but inside he felt as empty as an old, hollow tree stump. His cabin, made of sturdy logs, was his whole world, and it was a very lonely world indeed. The days were long and filled with the sound of his axe chopping wood. Thwack! Thwack! Each swing sent pieces of wood flying, but it couldn't chop away the sadness that clung to him like morning mist. He cooked his simple meals over a crackling fire, the flames dancing and casting shadows that seemed to mock his solitude. He ate in silence, the only sounds the chirping of crickets outside or the hoot of an owl in the distance. Evenings were the hardest. After the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery colors, Jedediah would sit by his window. He'd watch the stars pop out, one by one, like tiny diamonds scattered across a dark velvet cloth. He often wondered if anyone else out there felt as small and alone as he did. His heart ached for something, anything, to fill the vast emptiness that had made its home deep inside him. He longed for a connection, a friend, a whisper of a shared life, but all he had was the quiet hum of the forest and his own heavy thoughts. Even with the quiet beauty of his forest home, Jedediah couldn't escape the ache in his heart. So every few weeks, he'd take his wagon and make the long, dusty trip to the nearest small town. This town, with its creaky wooden sidewalks and bustling general store, was a world away from his silent woods. Here the air buzzed with the chatter of people, the clatter of horses' hooves, and the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer. It was full of life, sound, and the promise of connection. Jedediah would walk through the dusty streets, his eyes scanning the faces of farmers, merchants, and other lumberjacks. He'd hear snippets of laughter, see friends greeting each other, and watch children playing games in the street. He'd buy flour, sugar, and whatever else he needed, exchanging a few polite words with the storekeeper. But even surrounded by all this hubbub, a strange wall seemed to rise around him. He felt like a ghost, walking unseen among the living. The noise, the smiles, the shared stories, none of it seemed to reach him. He'd stand by the saloon, listening to the lively piano music and boisterous voices, but he never stepped inside. He'd watch families share meals at the diner, their faces lit with easy smiles. Each time a fresh wave of loneliness would wash over him. The town, meant to cure his solitude, only made it feel deeper. It showed him what he was missing, without offering a way to find it. After a few hours, Jedediah would turn his wagon back towards the quiet woods, his heart still heavy, the emptiness still there. One dusty afternoon, during one of his usual quiet visits to town, Jedediah's gaze fell upon something that stopped him cold. In the center of the dusty square, near the general store, a small crowd had gathered. A large, rough-looking man with a booming voice was shouting, his words harsh and unsettling. Beside him stood a woman, her head slightly bowed. She wore simple, worn clothes, and her hands were tied loosely in front of her. Jedediah pushed through the onlookers, drawn by a feeling he couldn't name. As he got closer, he saw her clearly. Her hair was dark, a bit tangled, and her face was smudged with dirt, but even so, there was a quiet beauty about her. Her eyes, though downcast, held a deep sadness, yet also a flicker of something unbroken, like a tiny flame in a strong wind. She didn't cry out, didn't struggle, didn't even make a sound. She was utterly silent. The cruel man was trying to sell her, speaking of her as if she were a horse or a tool, not a person. His words were loud and ugly, echoing in the square, but the woman, Elias, remained still and quiet. Her silence was not a weakness. It was a shield, a silent protest. Jedediah watched her, his own loneliness momentarily forgotten. He felt a sudden, sharp pang of anger at the man's cruelty, and a strange, powerful pull towards Elias's silent strength. In her sad, quiet presence, Jedediah saw a reflection of his own unspoken pain, but also a hint of something resilient and enduring. Jedediah couldn't tear his eyes away from Elias. The cruel man's shouts faded into a dull buzz in his ears. What truly spoke to Jedediah was Elias's quietness. It wasn't the silence of someone broken, but the deep, still quiet of a mountain lake, holding secrets and strength within. In her silence, Jedediah felt a kinship he hadn't found in all the noisy chatter of the town. His own life was mostly silent, but his was a silence of loneliness. Hers seemed different, a chosen quiet, a shield, maybe even a language of its own. A sudden, fierce protectiveness surged through him. He couldn't let this silent, strong woman be treated like a piece of property. He thought of his hard-earned savings, tucked away in a leather pouch back at his cabin. It was meant for a new axe, or perhaps a stronger wagon, but those things suddenly seemed unimportant. What truly mattered was the quiet dignity he saw in Elias, and the wrongness of her situation. Taking a deep breath, Jedediah stepped forward. His voice, usually quiet and unused, felt rough as he spoke. "How much?" he asked, his gaze fixed on the cruel man, but his heart focused on Elias. The man looked surprised, then grinned, sensing a good bargain. He named a high price, a price that would take almost all of Jedediah's carefully saved money. Without a moment's hesitation, Jedediah nodded. He would pay. He had to. He felt a strong, clear sense that freeing this silent woman was the most important thing he could do. With the money paid and Elias's bonds untied, a strange quiet settled between them. The cruel man grumbled and walked away, counting his coins. Jedediah simply looked at Elias, then nodded towards his waiting wagon. She looked at him, her dark eyes still holding that deep sadness, but also a hint of something unreadable, then quietly climbed aboard. The journey back to the cabin was silent, save for the creak of the wagon wheels and the soft rustle of leaves. When they reached Jedediah's small cabin, nestled deep among the towering pines, Elias stepped down. She looked around, taking in the rough-hewn logs, the simple wooden door, and the vast, quiet forest that stretched endlessly around them. Jedediah opened the door for her, his heart thumping a little harder than usual. It felt strange having another person in his solitary home. Inside, the cabin was humble but clean. There was a small fireplace, a rough table, and Jedediah's narrow cot. Elias walked in slowly, her footsteps light. She didn't speak a single word, didn't ask a question, didn't make a sound beyond her gentle movements. Yet, her very presence began to change the air in the small room. The usual heavy silence that Jedediah lived with started to feel different. It wasn't empty anymore. It felt softer, warmer, as if a quiet peace had entered with her. Jedediah found himself breathing a little easier, a sense of calm settling over him that he hadn't felt in years. Her silence, rather than adding to his loneliness, strangely brought a sense of quiet comfort. The first few days with Elias in the cabin were a new kind of quiet for Jedediah. The comfortable calm of her presence was a balm, but he still felt the need to speak, to share. He tried, hesitantly at first, to talk to her. "The forest can be mighty cold in winter," he'd say, as he chopped firewood, "but there's nothing like a warm fire after a long day." Elias would pause her quiet work, perhaps mending a tear in her simple dress, and look up at him. Her eyes, dark and deep, would meet his, gentle and understanding. She never spoke a word in reply. He told her about his lumberjack work, the biggest trees he'd felled, the storms he'd weathered alone in his cabin. He spoke of the animals he sometimes saw, a family of deer by the creek, a watchful owl on a high branch. He even told her about his trips to town and how empty he felt there. Jedediah spoke about his past, about how he came to live alone in the woods, his voice soft, almost a whisper, as if he were talking to himself. Elara would listen to every word. She would sit across from him by the fire, her hands often busy with some small task, but her gaze always steady and kind. There was no judgment in her eyes, only a quiet attention that made Jedediah feel truly heard for the first time in years. He didn't get answers, or advice, or even a nod, but the way she listened, so completely and calmly, was a different kind of reply. It was a silent understanding that began to chip away at the walls around his heart. As Jedediah continued to share his quiet stories, Elara's gentle listening was not her only way of showing care. Soon, without a single word, she began to take on tasks around the small cabin. Jedediah would come in from chopping wood to find his simple meal already prepared, a warm stew simmering over the fire, or bread baking with a sweet, earthy smell. His rough clothes, once patched clumsily by his own big hands, were now mended with tiny, neat stitches. Elara moved with a quiet grace, her hands quick and sure. She swept the cabin floor until no speck of dust remained, arranged a few pots and pans in a tidy order, and even planted a few wildflowers in a tin can by the window, bringing a touch of color inside. Jedediah watched her, amazed by her skill. She didn't need to be told what to do. She simply saw what was needed and did it, her actions speaking louder than any words. Her kindness was in every thoughtful gesture. She'd leave a cup of cool water by his bedside after a long day, or make sure his axe was sharpened just so. Jedediah, who had always taken care of everything himself, found a deep sense of relief and gratitude blooming in his chest. It wasn't just the help. It was the silent care, the unspoken understanding that filled his home with a warmth he'd never known. Her presence was like a gentle hand, smoothing out the rough edges of his solitary life, making his world a softer, kinder place. Beyond her quiet helpfulness in the cabin, Jedediah started to notice something even more remarkable about Elara. She had a way with the forest, a deep understanding of its whispers in ways that Jedediah, despite living there for years, had never truly grasped. He would see her sometimes, sitting silently on the porch, and a curious deer would cautiously approach, nibbling at the grass nearby without fear. Chipmunks, usually quick to dart away, would scamper closer to her, their tiny eyes bright with curiosity. Once, Jedediah watched her gently tend to a bird with a broken wing. She didn't make a sound, but her touch was soft and sure. She carefully bound the wing with a strip of cloth and left berries for it to eat. The bird, usually wild, seemed to sense her goodness and rested quietly in her cupped hands. Another time she pointed to a patch of dirt near the creek, and Jedediah, following her silent lead, found fresh paw prints of a mother bear and her cubs. She seemed to know the forest's secrets without ever having to speak them. It was as if Elara and the woods shared a secret language, a language of stillness and gentle observation. She knew which berries were safe to eat, where the best herbs grew for healing small cuts, and could sense a coming rain long before the clouds darkened. Jedediah, the lumberjack who spent his days felling trees, now saw the forest through Elara's eyes, not just as wood to be cut, but as a living, breathing place, full of its own wisdom and gentle magic. Her silent wisdom taught him to truly see. As the days spun into weeks, and the seasons began to subtly shift, Jedediah found his life slowly, wonderfully changing. The deep, heavy sadness that had been his constant companion for so long began to lift, like morning fog burned away by the sun. It wasn't a sudden burst of happiness, but a gentle easing, a quiet comfort that settled into the corners of his heart. He no longer felt the sharp pang of loneliness when he sat by the fire in the evenings. Instead, Elias' silent presence across from him, her hands perhaps busy with a mending needle or a bowl of herbs, filled the space with a soft warmth. Her quietness, which once mirrored his own solitude, now felt like a shared peace. He found himself humming old tunes as he chopped wood, something he hadn't done in years. His steps were lighter, and the corners of his mouth, long downturned, now hinted at a gentle smile. Jedediah realized he wasn't trying to fill a void anymore. Elias' quiet company, her thoughtful actions, and her special understanding of the forest had woven a new tapestry of life around him. The emptiness he had carried for so long was slowly being replaced by a sense of belonging, a quiet joy that was both new and deeply familiar. He still didn't hear her speak, but he heard her heart in every kind deed, every gentle glance, and every shared moment of peaceful silence. His sadness wasn't gone overnight, but it was fading, replaced by a quiet contentment he had almost forgotten was possible. One evening, as Jedediah watched Elias by the fire, mending his torn shirt with nimble fingers, a powerful understanding washed over him. He had always thought of silence as an empty space, a gap where words should be, a reminder of his own loneliness. But Elias' silence was different. It wasn't empty at all. It was full, rich, and deep. It was like the quiet of the forest before dawn, brimming with hidden life and promise. Her silence was a gentle echo of the quiet woods he loved, but it was also so much more. It was a peaceful presence, a warm, understanding stillness that filled his small cabin, and more importantly, his heart. He realized that for all his talking, for all his attempts to fill the quiet with his own stories, what he truly needed was not more words, but more understanding. And Elias, without saying a single thing, offered that understanding in abundance. Her gentle eyes, her thoughtful actions, her shared moments of quiet work, these were her words. They spoke of care, of patience, of a deep, calm wisdom. Jedediah no longer felt the need for her to speak. Her very being was a form of communication, a constant, comforting song that played softly in his soul. He saw now that her silence didn't make her incomplete, it made her whole, and in turn, it made his own quiet life feel complete too. It was a revelation, a discovery that changed everything. The loneliness he once felt had been replaced by a serene connection, woven entirely without sound. With his heart feeling lighter and his spirit calmer, Jedediah's eyes began to open in new ways. He had lived in the woods for years, seeing only the trees he needed to cut, the path to town, and the familiar outline of his cabin. But now, guided by Elias' gentle way of being, he started to truly see the forest around him. It was as if she had peeled back a veil he didn't even know was there. He would follow her, sometimes, on her quiet walks near the creek, or through the sun-dappled glades. She wouldn't point or speak, but her slow, watchful pace and the direction of her gaze taught him. He began to notice tiny wild strawberries hiding beneath broad leaves, ripe and sweet. He saw the delicate patterns on a moth's wings, something he would have once dismissed as a simple bug. The way sunlight filtered through the highest branches, painting shifting patterns on the forest floor, became a beautiful show he stopped to admire. Jedediah, the man who once only heard the asterisk thwack of his axe, now heard the soft gurgle of the stream, the rustle of a tiny mouse in the undergrowth, and the varied calls of birds he'd never truly listened to before. Elias showed him, without a word, how to sit still and simply be asterisks in the forest, to let its quiet magic wash over him. He found peace in these small wonders, a deep joy in the intricate dance of nature that had always been there, waiting for him to finally see it. His world, once a place of work and solitude, became a place of quiet discovery and endless beauty. Jedediah's newfound ability to truly see the forest, also brought a deeper awareness of Elias' unique way with it. He watched, often from a distance, as she moved through the trees, not just observing, but actively caring. One afternoon, he saw her kneel beside a young sapling that had been bent and broken by a fallen branch. With gentle hands, she carefully straightened its fragile stem, supporting it with a small stick and tying it with a piece of soft vine. She seemed to mourn its injury and then quietly nurture its chance to heal. Another time, a small rabbit, limping badly, found its way near the cabin. Jedediah might have just watched it, feeling sorry but unsure what to do. Elias, however, approached it with slow, calm movements. She picked it up, cradling it in her hands, and carried it inside. For days, she kept it warm by the fire, feeding it tiny bits of greens and water, her touch always gentle and soothing. Jedediah saw the rabbit grow stronger, its fear slowly replaced by a trusting stillness in Elias' presence. It was clear that Elias didn't just understand nature, she honored it. She treated every living thing, from the smallest blade of grass to the largest deer, with a deep, silent respect. Jedediah, whose life had been about taking from the forest, cutting trees for his livelihood, began to understand a different way. He saw that true strength wasn't just in felling a mighty oak, but also in mending a tiny wing, in helping a struggling plant, and in living in harmony with the wild world around them. Her actions were lessons in kindness and reverence, teaching him a profound respect for every part of the living earth. As Elias continued her quiet work of healing and honoring the forest, a remarkable change began to spread through the woods around Jedediah's cabin. It was subtle at first, like the soft blush of dawn, but soon it became clear to Jedediah that his corner of the Wild West was transforming. The wildflowers, usually a modest scattering, now bloomed in vibrant carpets of color, their petals seeming to glow with a brighter, richer hue. The air itself felt fresher, carrying the sweet scent of pine and blossoms. Even more striking was the behavior of the animals. The deer, which once kept a wary distance, now grazed closer to the cabin, their large, soft eyes watching Jedediah and Elias with a calm trust. Squirrels and chipmunks, bolder than ever, would sometimes dart onto the porch, chattering softly before scampering away. Birds, in numbers Jedediah hadn't seen before, sang sweeter, more complex songs from the branches above. It was as if the entire forest had sensed Elias' gentle touch and responded with its own blossoming life. Jedediah, walking through his familiar woods, felt a new sense of wonder. The trees stood taller, their leaves a deeper green. The stream bubbled with a clearer, happier sound. This wasn't just a place where he worked and lived. It was a sanctuary, a vibrant tapestry of life, woven by Elias' silent care. He saw now that her presence not only healed his own heart, but was also breathing new life and harmony into the very land around them. The woods, once a silent witness to his loneliness, now hummed with a gentle, thriving energy, a true reflection of the peace she had brought. With his own heart lighter and the forest around him thriving, Jedediah's infrequent trips to town became noticeably different. The townsfolk, who had known him as the quiet, often sad lumberjack, couldn't help but notice the change. His shoulders, once hunched with the weight of loneliness, now seemed broader, more relaxed. The lines of worry around his eyes had softened, and his gaze, which used to avoid others, now held a gentle warmth. The biggest change, however, was his smile. It wasn't a wide, booming laugh, but a soft, genuine upturn of his lips that reached his eyes. He'd nod more readily to the storekeeper, even share a small pleasantry with a fellow lumberjack. "Morning, Jedediah," someone might say, and Jedediah would respond with a quiet, "Good morning to you," his voice holding a new, easy tone. "Jedediah's looking mighty fine these days," old Mrs. Gable whispered to her neighbor outside the general store. "Heard he got himself a helper out in the woods." Others murmured about it too, wondering what had put such a quiet spring in his step and a gentle light in his eyes. They didn't know about Alara, or the quiet magic she brought, but they saw the clear evidence of her presence in Jedediah. He carried himself with a peacefulness that was both new and deeply settled, a man transformed by an unspoken joy. The town, which once only deepened his loneliness, now simply reflected the quiet happiness he carried within. The change in Jedediah was undeniable, but it wasn't the only thing the townspeople and other lumberjacks started to notice. As they ventured deeper into the woods for their own work, or perhaps took a detour near Jedediah's usual logging areas, they couldn't help but comment on the unusual beauty of his section of the forest. "Have you seen the wildflowers near Jedediah's creek lately?" one would ask. "Never seen them so bright, like painted jewels." Another lumberjack might remark, "The deer ain't so skittish around his parts anymore. Almost walked right up to a buck the other day, bold as you please." They noticed the air felt cleaner, the birdsong seemed richer, and there was a feeling of quiet peace that settled over Jedediah's woods, unlike anywhere else. It wasn't just healthy, it felt happier. Whispers started in town. "What's Jedediah doing out there? Heard he's got a special touch with the land now." They couldn't quite put their finger on it, but the part of the forest near Jedediah's cabin glowed with a new vitality. They wondered about the cause, connecting it vaguely to Jedediah's own transformation. It was a mystery, a gentle magic that made his corner of the Wild West feel like a hidden paradise. The forest, through Ilara's silent influence, had become a living testament to healing, drawing curious glances and hushed awe from those who passed by. The forest around Jedediah's cabin continued to flourish, and Jedediah himself felt more at peace than ever. One chilly autumn evening, a fierce storm swept through the woods, bringing down branches and making the cabin creak. Jedediah, worried about the damage to his tools and the risk of fire, spent the night alert. The next morning, as the sun began to peek through the cleared skies, he stepped outside to assess the mess. His prize axe, the one he relied on most, had been left leaning against a tree. During the storm, a heavy limb had fallen, pinning it firmly to the ground. Its handle snapped clean in two. Jedediah felt a familiar pang of frustration, a small echo of his old sadness. This axe was not just a tool. It was a symbol of his livelihood, and replacing it would be a hardship. He sighed, looking at the broken wood and gleaming steel. Ilara, who had been quietly gathering fallen pine cones, saw his distress. Without a sound, she walked over and knelt beside the broken axe. Jedediah expected her to simply look, perhaps offer a silent gesture of sympathy. Instead, she reached into a small pouch she carried, pulled out some strong, thin strips of leather, and a special sticky tree sap she had collected. With careful, patient hands, she began to mend the broken handle. Her movements were precise, her brow furrowed in concentration. She worked for a long time, weaving the leather tightly, sealing it with the sap, until the handle was strong again, even stronger than before. Jedediah watched, deeply moved. This small, silent act of mending, born of pure kindness, spoke volumes. It showed him the true giving heart of Ilara, a heart that sought to heal and restore, not just in the forest, but in his life too. Watching Ilara mend his broken axe, a simple act of profound kindness, Jedediah felt a deep warmth spread through his chest. It was more than just a mended tool, it was a mended heart. In that moment, he fully understood. Ilara's silence, once a mystery, was now the clearest language he knew. It was not a lack of sound, but a fullness of being, a gentle presence that had quietly, steadily healed the deep wounds of his loneliness. He realized that all the chatter of the town, all the words he had yearned to hear, could never have done what Ilara's quiet spirit had achieved. Her unspoken understanding, her respectful care for the forest, her thoughtful actions around the cabin, and her unwavering, gentle gaze had slowly brought light back into his dim world. The emptiness that had once defined him was gone, replaced by a quiet contentment and a sense of belonging he never thought possible. Jedediah saw that Ilara hadn't just changed him. She had brought life back to everything around him. The brighter flowers, the friendlier animals, the vibrant hum of the forest. It was all a reflection of the peace and kindness she carried within her. Her silence had not only healed his lonely heart, but had also awakened his world, transforming his solitary existence into a shared, beautiful life. He felt a profound gratitude, a silent promise to cherish this newfound peace and the silent woman who had brought it to him. After the axe was mended and the understanding fully settled in his heart, Jedediah looked at Elias. His throat felt tight with emotion, but no words came. He didn't need them. The deep gratitude, the profound love he felt for this silent woman, was too big for mere sounds, was a feeling that bloomed in his chest, warm and constant, like the perennial wildflowers in the forest she tended. He knew, without a doubt, that she understood. Her eyes met his, and in their gentle depths, he saw a mirroring of his own feelings, a quiet acceptance that spoke volumes. It was a connection forged not in speech, but in shared moments of peace, in unspoken kindness, and in the healing she had brought to his life and the world around them. Jedediah reached out, his big, calloused hand gently covering hers, where it rested on the newly mended axe handle. It was a silent touch, a tender promise, an expression of all the feelings he couldn't voice. He wasn't asking for words from her, nor did he need to offer any of his own. Their bond was deeper than words, built on the quiet strength of her presence and the way her spirit had brought his own back to life. In that silent gesture, Jedediah poured all his love and gratitude, a language perfectly understood between two souls who had found healing in quietude. From that day forward, Jedediah and Elias built a life together in the heart of the transformed woods. Their days flowed with a quiet rhythm, a dance of unspoken understanding and shared purpose. Jedediah continued his work as a lumberjack, but with a new respect for each tree, choosing carefully, always mindful of the balance Elias had taught him. He no longer felt the need to escape to town to ease his loneliness. His world, once so small and empty, was now full and vibrant right where he was. Elias continued her gentle care of their home in the surrounding forest. She cultivated small patches of herbs and wildflowers, their colors brightening the cabin's edges. The animals remained their silent friends, often seen near the cabin, a testament to the peace Elias had brought. They would sit by the fire in the evenings, not needing words, simply enjoying the warmth and each other's presence. Jedediah would sometimes hum softly, and Elias would offer a gentle smile, a rare but precious sight. Their bond was a tapestry woven from silence, kindness, and deep respect. It was strong and true, a testament to the idea that love and understanding don't always need words to grow. They lived simply, in harmony with the wild beauty around them, two souls connected by a peace that had healed Jedediah's heart and brought the forest itself to life. Their story was one of quiet miracles, a testament to the power of unspoken love. In the end, the small cabin in the Wild West woods, once a lonely outpost, became a true home, a haven of quiet beauty. It was a place where Jedediah, the lumberjack with the healed heart, and Elias, the silent woman, lived a life rich in unspoken understanding. The vibrant wildflowers, the trusting animals, the fresh, sweet air, all these things were not just part of their surroundings, they were reflections of the peace that bloomed within the cabin walls. Their home stood as a living story, a testament to a powerful truth, that sometimes the greatest healing comes not from loud words or grand gestures, but from gentle silence and simple kindness. Jedediah had found his voice in Elias' quiet presence, learning to listen with his heart rather than just his ears. And Elias, in her freedom and the safety of their shared home, had found a sanctuary where her silent strength could flourish, spreading beauty and calm to every corner of their world. Travelers passing by Jedediah's section of the woods might not have known the full tale, but they would feel it. They would feel the unusual peace, see the brighter colors, and hear the sweeter bird songs. It was a place touched by magic, a silent promise whispered on the wind, proving that love, respect, and a gentle spirit could transform even the loneliest heart and the wildest of lands into a peaceful, beautiful paradise.